Hypothesis in terms of sociology is a relationship between two or more variables. And what a variable is something, some quality, some characteristic that changes from case to case, or typically person to person. So what sociologists try to do is they, for a hypothesis, take a couple of variables, at least two, and try to come up with an explanation for why these two variables or more variables are interconnected or are related.
People in sociology use the scientific method. The scientific method has a number of steps. Most grade school and high school students become familiar with the scientific method because that's taught in those classrooms as well. It starts with the problem, then one goes to the review of the literature, what other people have known or found out about that problem, so that you can build upon what is already known, but also add into things that are not known, that there are questions that still remain to be answered. From that review of literature, one develops a set of questions, a questionnaire, in order to get information about that particular problem. Then you gather the data. You go out and find people to answer your questionnaire, and once you have that data, you then have to analyze it. What does it mean? You put it into a computer, crunch the numbers, or do some other kind of operation to figure out what it means. From that, you develop a conclusion, and from your conclusion, you publish results, and then develop further research questions. To give you an example about that process, I'll use my dissertation process. I was interested in the question about the use of drugs, illegal substances, particularly marijuana. In the 1970s, this was a concern in society, but the research about who uses marijuana and why was largely confined to people who were picked up by law enforcement, which meant poor people in the inner city. But I knew that middle-class kids were using these substances, so my question was, what about them? What are they doing? When do they start it? What causes them to use it? I went to the literature about this. I spent about a year actually looking at everything I could find about use of drugs, and from that developed an extensive questionnaire for fifth graders, for middle school, and for high schoolers. We were able to go into a school district who allowed us to gather data on all of the students in school on that particular day. So we have around 600 or so students. We had information from an upper middle class suburb that was used to find out about middle class students. We then had to take that information from the questionnaires and put it on, type it into little cards that were put into a computer that could read it and translate that into numbers, and a computer program called SPSS, which is a standard program that's used by sociologists in analyzing data, gave us a lot of information about what the categories were, about what the use was, and allowed us to compare and put together things like, are boys more likely to use it than girls, which in fact was the case, and to answer a lot of other questions about middle class use. We developed that information into some papers, into a book. We had newspaper interviews about it, so we disseminated the information, and I've continued to work in that domain answering other questions throughout my career.